Welcome to the Your Fitness Chick podcast. Become your best self. I'm Abby, your fitness chick, and I'm excited to have a really great guest on the show today. Today, I'm joined by Dr. James Bogash, an expert in wellness and longevity, and he is here to help enlighten us and share some really valuable information on aging and longevity and doing it in a natural way. So welcome, Dr. Bogash.
Hello, Abby. Good. It's good morning to me. I don't think it's morning to you.
Right. So. You're in Arizona. I'm in Florida. So it's 12 noon. So I'm like already on my fifth meal. So good morning, good afternoon to you. So why don't we just start off and let the listeners know about your background? Because I know you're going to be sharing all kinds of real great info, and we want to have an insight on where you obtained that from.
So I've been a practicing chiropractor for 25 years. I'm in my beginning my 26th year. And even early in practice, I went to a seminar by a PhD by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Bland. And I remember listening to the seminar about how many amazing things he was saying about physiology and how the body works. And then the next morning I woke up, I'm like, what? Like, I don't remember anything that he said. But it started that path down functional medicine and lifestyle and how powerful the choices we make are around stress levels, exercise, diet, environmental exposure, all of those. So as I continued with chiropractic, that became a natural fit because we typically spend about 10 to 15 minutes with each patient on each visit. We can talk about the weather, or we can talk about them exercising, or I always start with, what are you having for breakfast? So the chiropractic, the beautiful thing about that is that it allows me to help people move. I feel that my job is to keep people moving, and there's nothing they can do that is better for their health than to be moving. So that's kind of been the genesis of the practice. So really structural care, and then everybody who comes through the office is gonna, if they have any questions, we can ask about pretty much anything except hair loss. We can provide some resources.
And for those of you who might be listening, Dr. Bogash definitely does have a whole full head of hair, but he is sporting a nice, clean shaven, bald head. We like it. So that was some dry humor you put in there. That was great. So obviously you are a chiropractor. Was there something that came across your path in your lifetime that made you decide that that was something you were really interested in? Now, why did you pursue chiropractic care?
It was interesting. I actually looked initially at osteopathic school, ended up in chiropractic school, and looking back, it really is the perfect scenario. My brain is an abstract thinker, so I go in 50 directions at once, which can be hard to kind of wrangle. But the being in a place where I can make my revenue working on patients, and yet gives me that opportunity to talk to them about better choices in their health. Like, I can't think of a more perfect scenario than that.
Awesome. Yeah. And definitely, as we are evolving in healthcare and more people are becoming more proactive about their health, slowly but surely, and realizing that there's a lot of alternative methods out there. I'm not saying that conventional medicine is bad. It's needed.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think there's a lot of times that pen is put to that prescription pad too quickly when there's other things that we could do. Number one, to prevent it from happening. And number two, to alternatively try to heal from things that we're having challenges with. So, you do a lot of social media stuff. That's how we were actually introduced by a mutual connection. And you claim to be an expert on health and longevity, and you do a lot of really cool, I think you call it a slingshot to better health. Yeah, it's like a 1-minute video clip.
Yes.
So what do you think are the top 3 things that people can start to implement right away to improve their longevity?
I think we have to be moving. I look at people. There's a lot of people in the anti-aging longevity space, but then you look at people like Jack LaLanne, who he lived it. Jack LaLanne and Joe Ryder, you can't argue with what they did. So exercise, movement just has to be a part of that. I absolutely agree that we have more knowledge today about how to live longer, healthier. I don't know that we can extend lifespan, but we can certainly extend health span. And we just want, we have tools like hyperbaric, like cold exposure, like sauna exposure, um, BFR. I'm a pretty big fan of BFR, so blood flow restriction training. Um, we have all this information. I think a lot of society is not taking advantage of it, but we have more information now than Jack LaLanne probably had back in his day
Sure.
about ways to live longer. And for those of your listeners who don't, he was 96. Really, I don't think anybody was more pivotal in changing fitness in certainly the United States, probably the world, than Jack LaLanne was.
Yeah.
So I really look at him as a icon for what it takes to live healthy for as long as we can.
Yeah, for sure. So
So
movement is one thing. What are two other things that you think that people can start to do?
diet becomes a big issue. Um, Huge topic there, but generally support more of a paleo Mediterranean type diet. Paleo diet, people don't eat olives and olive oil, but I think that that's certainly fits in with the lifestyle, with a healthy lifestyle. So unprocessed, there's no doubt that unprocessed foods is a better way to go.
Mm.
And so diet is critical. I feel that when we're younger, diet is probably more important than exercise. We need to be moving, but diet, if you had to put all your effort into something, it should be diet. There's a lot of things that happen in our teens and 20s that set the pace for the rest of your life. Women, the risk of breast cancer is affected by multiple things as a teenager. So, um, and so that's those are important things. As we get older, then I think that physical fitness, exercise, muscle building becomes the more critical factor. It's not that diet is, they're both equally important, but I think we should focus on some more than others if that's all you have time for is diet or exercise. Maybe if you're 60, we should definitely be hitting the gym. The third thing, which I have some of the hardest tools for, is stress management. When I say stress kills, like it does, the nice thing is it kills slowly over the course of decades as your life and quality of life just goes downhill.
I think those are three really great things. I would probably be in absolute agreement with that because, I think they have found that people are living longer because they are finding more and more medications that extend people's lives that can overcome certain chronic diseases. However, and let me know if you disagree or agree with this, although people are living longer, their quality of life is not there.
Yes.
And that's because they're not implementing these things that we're just talking about, with flexibility and mobility. If somebody's older and they haven't been engaged in continuous exercise, that to just carry their groceries becomes an issue, to just get off the couch, to take out the trash, the simple daily things become really pretty challenging for people. So, although the longevity is there, the quality of life isn't. And that's why it is so important that people start to actually get shaken awake with that because, it's like a little too late when they're in that position already to bounce back. It's hard.
But even then, I still. So I had a new patient last week, and just really low mobility. Even just flipping over on the when it takes them 3 minutes to flip over on an
When
exam
you're doing
table.
adjustment.
Yes, it's a challenge. So I just had her start talking about just doing. People are squats are great. Most people have a wall and a floor. Those can be done safely. Even just breaking the plane of the knee, just something. And I'll tell people to do 100 a day, and they're like 100. I'm like, well, if you brush your teeth, you can probably crank out 20 or 40 squats, and you're 2/3 of the way there. But something, and I don't think we're ever too late. I had a patient who was picked up powerlifting in his 50s, um, and it was very interesting. He had some injuries that led him to not be able to work out. Had an injury to his foot, and I saw at the time he saw me, he was probably mid to upper 60s, and his cognitive decline, like it was a little sad how rapid it occurred once he stopped moving. Um, had he kept moving or been able to keep moving, like I don't know what his lifestyle was like before he started powerlifting, but that made a huge impact on his functionality for several decades.
Yeah, for sure. And and I don't mean to say that it's too late because I never think it's too late. It's just going to become 10 times harder, than if you
Yes.
kind of avoid that whole process to begin with. So, what do you feel with nutrition? It's really challenging in today's day and time. And I think that when we go back, I was doing some research a while ago. When we look at family pictures from when we were growing up, we're not too far apart in age. Family reunions, the old times when we actually printed out pictures. um, when you look at those pictures, it's very rare that you really have people that are overweight in those pictures, right?
Yeah.
And then in today's day and time, sadly, it's quite the opposite. It's actually more unusual to see somebody who's fit and healthy. And, I have some ideas as to why that is, but with nutrition, I think that because so many people in today's day and time now it's dual income families, right? Because before it was just the husband, the man that usually went and worked, and the mom could create home cooked, whole food, fresh meals instead of processed meals. For people who are living that busy, crazy life that we all are, how do you guide people, or what are your recommendations for keeping that nutrition healthy and yet simple and doable?
I think that's where I really shine with patients. I feel that like I am pretty much the opposite of a meal planner. Our idea of meal planning is taking out something to defrost the night before. Um, but if somebody's a meal planner, then by all means. But if you're not a meal planner, I like don't try to meal plan. You're going to fail in the long run. So the like I don't consider myself a chef, like by no means whatsoever, but really good at throwing everything together in a surgical stainless steel uh, pan and olive oil and spices and making something that's fantastic for dinner. That didn't take longer than you know 15 minutes to make. I remember the first time I decided to try spaghetti squash. It's probably been within the past year, and I'm like, oh well, I'll just open it up and it'll look like it does, like in the videos. And no. So it kind of upset me because we couldn't have it for dinner that night. It kind of totally, like, I had to actually meal prep my spaghetti squash. So it turns out that night, with as I was making dinner, I also made the spaghetti squash and just put it in some butter flavored olive oil, and some seasoning, and then we had it the next day for meal.
Okay.
So we started maybe 6 months ago with one of the online. This one in particular was Imperfect Foods, an online. It's not just produce, but we looked at it for produce delivery. So every Thursday we get a box of veggies that we pick. Our cart comes preloaded, but I take half of it out and put more veggies in. And we, like, I open up the fridge and like there's veggies we have to eat, mainly because part of me's a cheapskate and I don't want to throw anything out. So my wife would be like, "Why did you put this in?" I'm like, "Because it was in the fridge. Of course, that's why I put that in there." Um, so like that type of world is absolutely doable with a unprocessed diet, having veggies on hand. I always dream of somewhere in retirement that has a market that you just go down to for that day and pick what you want. We That is the exact opposite of what we have here in the United States. I don't There's very few communities where you would go down and pick up your vegetables and your produce and your meats for the day.
Hmm.
Uh, it just doesn't exist anymore. It does in places in Mexico, Central America, Europe, and that's why I think our health. We are clearly one of the least healthy populations on the planet,
No doubt.
um, developed nations on the planet. And Abby, it's funny because I grew up in my teenage years going to teen dance clubs,
Oh yeah.
and so there's all of the a lot of those videos from back then are still posted, and you look at everybody, and of course we were moving all the time. If you're out dancing 3 nights a week, 4 hours at a time. Um, but you're right. I mean, clearly the demographics or the BMI is different in that population than it is today.
Yeah. And I think that, people have just had to, because I think there's so many dynamics we could go into talk, because you are just a wealth of information. You have so many areas that you're really knowledgeable in. So we could go a lot of different ways, but I think that again, it just comes down to that time factor, because especially when we're talking about those single parents out there that are trying to just make ends meet. They're trying to run Johnny to soccer practice, then they got to freaking do homework, then they've got to clean the house, they got to take out the dog, they got to figure out, now what are we going to eat for dinner?
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like, screw it, let's just go through the McDonald's drive through, let's just do that, because of the time restraint. And also now it's starting to become financials, because it is
Right.
expensive in some regards to eat healthier if you're
But the
doing it.
fast food isn't any cheaper these days anyway.
That's true.
So
That's true. It's the quick
um,
and the convenience thing.
I always have a couple go-to easy things for our house. We have, like, people think of hot dogs as being unhealthy, but we'll do, if we completely didn't plan. Um, the only challenge is almost every hot dog bun on the market is toxic, and every time I go to the grocery store, I'll spend 10 minutes in the hot staring at the hot dog buns, hoping that maybe there's a brand new one that wasn't there when I looked 30 seconds ago. But we'll do hot dogs because hot dogs don't need to be defrosted. We'll do organic, most likely nitrate, definitely nitrate free, and then we'll make a hollow out the hot dog bun and make a relish out of garlic and jalapenos and spices and mustard and um, so now the relish itself becomes very valuable.
Right.
So but it's something that literally takes about 10 minutes
Yeah.
and is relatively inexpensive. I always look for that. We always have the hot dogs um, in there just in case. I usually look for them when they're on sale because they can stay in the freezer. So there are options for that, and that meal is not nearly as expensive as it would be to go to fast food.
This is true. I think you just have to plan. I mean, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And, is it harder to do that? Well, yeah, of course it is. But, I certainly don't have time to go to the market every day. I do it twice a week, and I go with intention. And, the thing that's kind of been a buzzword that I've been noticing, I don't know if you've come across it, but now they're talking about nutrivores, like where you're trying to just make each meal as nutrient dense as you can. And so
I
just by that relish explanation, that's what came to my mind. And so now when I'm creating food, I mean, I'm trying to do something extreme, but when I'm talking about meals for my fitness clients, it's like, how much nutrients can you get? Because when you think about the amount of vegetables and fruits and protein that you should get in a day, if you're not planning it, there's no way that you're going to hit those goals. There's absolutely not. So you just want to look for, good nutrition, things to have on the standby, like you just mentioned, that are easy, that are still affordable, but that you plan ahead.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've not heard the term nutrivore. I like that though,
Yeah.
and
So
that's when we understand that every molecule that passes our mouth has the potential to impact our genetic expression, because a lot of our foods actually modify genetic expression, and that means that everything that crosses your mouth, crosses your lips, has to have value.
Mhm.
And you have fast food 3 times a day, and there's almost nothing.
Right.
I find it sad and funny that places like In and Out, the only thing they ask you is, do you want onions on that? Like, probably the only thing of value on that hamburger is the onion. That's the thing they have to ask you.
Well, I think too, everything in moderation. I mean, you can't be great all the time. We have to have a little bit of fun, but for the most part, nutrition, people don't realize how much it does affect your body. And all you have to do is, if you've eaten clean for a while, is eat something that's not clean and see how it affects you. Like, I literally had a piece of cake a few weeks ago, and I felt like I was going to go into a coma. Like, I know it sounds extreme, but it made me really feel sick and not well. And it just shows you how much your body responds to food.
And so many people are in that world of being sick for so long, they don't even
I
realize
love that.
that the thing that people say, well, it can't be that because I eat it every day. I'm like, well, it probably is that because you're eating it every day.
That is a great
So,
point.
um, like, absolutely, without a doubt, that those things play a role. And the cleaner you are, the more you notice some of those. I'll know for me. The other thing too, quantity is another big issue. Is that we eat way too many calories in this country. And I know, like, when I go to train, so I've been in the martial arts for 35, 36 years. And like what I eat before I train has a lot to do with, and sometimes if I eat before I train,
Hmm.
um, has a big impact on how I feel
Yeah.
with that. And so currently in jujitsu, and like, if you're not up to snuff, like, somebody's gonna remind you that you're not up to snuff.
Take you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think too, there's something to be said because, even though we want to fight the clock and the aging process, also there's something to be said that as you do get older, you really do learn to know your body because everybody's body is different and will have different response mechanisms to food and things like that. So as you really start to pay attention to that, that also can help guide you into what works well for you and what doesn't, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and hopefully desire. I think as we get older, we become a little bit more attentive, or should become more attentive to what we're doing. Um, there's one of the guys on, uh, he's got a T-shirt that says "Lift like your life depends on it,"
Yes, it does.
and it's, it's okay, there's not much else to say other than maintaining that muscle mass as we get older. But it becomes more. It should become more important to you as you get older.
But it doesn't for a lot of people because I think that a lot of people think, I mean, when you really just stop, I mean, if you think about it, if you go to any mall in America and you sit on a bench for 20 minutes, okay, and you watch people, which is fun to do,
Yes.
right? Most people are not in good shape. They're not. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, obviously everybody knows that, but people start to feel that's the norm. So, now I'm 45, now I'm 50, now I'm 55, now I'm 60. That's what everybody else looks like. So that's what I'm supposed to look like too. And I'm okay looking like that. They get super comfortable being comfortable because they're part of the norm. And the
Yeah.
norm is extremely unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. No disagreement with that. Yeah, it is a little. If you talk to anybody that goes on a European cruise, they'll come back and they're like, "Wow, you can really tell who the Americans are." It's very clear because they're not nearly as active, and at a time when you should be, without doubt, enjoying your life, people have less mobility, and like, that's nothing could be more disappointing. You now have the time and possibly the finances. Sorry, I've got a big black dog here. No, I told you about every 20 minutes he wants a
He
hug.
needs
So,
attention. He needs confirmation that he's okay.
yeah, this is
Oh
Wally.
my God, he's so cute. Now, what kind of dog is this?
He's a Staffordshire. He's a big
Oh
Staffordshire.
my
So
God,
this
is
is
he a sweetie? And how
that's
much
all I
does he
want.
weigh?
He's about 70 pounds, and he's ripped and cut. He
He
does.
is, I could tell.
We have an older pit that's not. She's always been a little bit chubby. I think she has a thyroid problem. But we always get these dogs, and I'm sure she's thinking, why do you get these dogs that make me look fat? So, so anyway, so yeah, the so I apologize for that, but
Oh, no worries.
got
That's what my dog's always, she's hiding back over there. So, but no,
he's
we were
back
just
over on.
talking about how, people should want to fight the loss of muscle, but instead I think a lot of people are just being comfortable settling in.
And then we have pain becomes a factor. The sad thing is that people, like knee pain. There is probably nothing better for knee pain than movement. And yet, when people start to hurt, they become fearful that they're going to create more damage, and then they stop moving. The exact thing that they should be doing, And part of that, I can't tell you, even my own colleagues and orthopedic docs and PTs, they want to restrict people from moving. And as opposed to let pain be your guide, um, it's just, and I think people that reinforces like, oh, well, my doctor told me I don't have to move, so I'm not going to. Uh, had two patients in the past couple months. These are dynamic older females. Um, one's in her upper 60s, the other one's in her young 70s, and hiking, yoga, very active people, and both developed knee pain that they came in and they were quite frustrated with. Guys, does this mean that I'm not going to be able to continue? And literally within like two or three, I'm like, you need to be moving. This is just a temporary. And it was just the ligament on the inside that we worked on from a soft tissue standpoint. And two or three visits later, they're like I feel much better.
Oh, good.
Like maybe today. Um, so I think that's the challenge too, is we don't go to the right providers who reinforce the fact that we need to be moving. Um, Even if that knee is hurting, like we should be moving.
Right.
And that becomes the downslide for a lot of people is that something hurts and so they stop using it.
But okay, so I have a couple of fitness clients that have knee issues. And so it depends on what obviously the injury or challenge is, because there are some circumstances where some movement might not be the best
Yeah.
idea for it, right? But I'm total agree with you that like I have one lady, she's dealing with some meniscus issues and things like this. And so I'm like, well then swim. Like if you're in the water, at least the buoyancy of the water is going to take some pressure off. You're moving. You just have to move because that's where we're on the exact same page. It's like move it or lose it, because then if you stop moving, then you start eating bad, right? And then they just hang it all up. So I agree with that. But yeah, and I think that it's unfortunate that there's not as many doctors that are proactive like you that are saying, yeah, hey, let's try this, let's try that, but just keep moving and encouraging them to
Yeah.
fight through that pain.
And I deal with that a lot in the martial arts, especially jujitsu, because you now have an external force that can can throw a wrench in the works. And so I always tell people, I'm like, you don't have to stop rolling. Just pick who you roll with and tap early, tap often type thing. That's the motto there.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean you have to stop. You just have to be careful
Right.
as you do that. A lot of shoulder problems in jujitsu as well. Less knee because you're not weight bearing, but you're using your shoulders a lot.
Yeah.
So shoulders can be a wee bit on the tricky side. Um, but anyway, but those there's still things that we can do. We still need to move.
Yeah. 100%. Well, being that you're a chiropractor is great. I've actually had a bad back my entire life, and now I go to a chiropractor every week. So I have scoliosis, and so I'm always there every week. But you actually have some really cool other things that you've kind of honed in on, and I want to bring those up. There's three different things. So the first one is you've written a book on migraines. Is that Wally?
Our landscapers are still here.
You've written a
He's
book,
quite a deterrent to anybody coming in the house, though.
you would know. You've written a book on migraines and epilepsy. Okay. So what made you want to create a book on that specific topic?
So I had always been a physiology geek. That's really what I describe myself. I read on the range about 120 medical journals a month. I've done that for like 25 years now.
Wow.
And so when I had a family member that developed epilepsy, I went down that rabbit hole quite extensively and realized that there's a lot, just like everything else. It's never about fixing the problem. If we numb down the brain cells so they're not communicating with one another, that we all high five each other and pat each other in the back and think that we've fixed the problem, and we haven't. We've just stopped the seizures using medication. And by no means am I saying that you shouldn't be, but there's a lot of things you can do for brain health while you're medicated, and that's not the conversation that is frequently had by people with epilepsy. And so, that naturally progresses to things like anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, because all those brain-based behaviors have an outcome on all of those positive things. And cognitive decline is a huge issue with our aging
Oh,
population.
100%.
we never had memory centers, and now they're big
Yeah,
business.
huge.
So and cognitive decline, like we've known, we've spent billions on trying to find drugs to fix it, and in all reality, I don't know that we ever will. I'm quite confident we never will, but because by the time somebody's been diagnosed, they are well on their way to um, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and it's been going that way for 20 or 30 years. So it's not something we can turn around. Maybe slow, but not turn around. And so cognitive decline and is all about our lifestyle. So all the billions we spent on neurofibular tangles or amyloid plaques have been largely a failure. And but in that time of those billions, we found so many things that contribute to healthy cognitive aging and unhealthy cognitive aging. And exercise is, ironically enough, surprisingly enough, it's high on the list.
Isn't it? It's crazy. I mean, I know just when I get back into the groove and focusing on my workouts and not hitting the the off the wagon mark, that my focus is so much better. Like just so much things are so much more improved. So that's great. So you were inspired based on a family member
Yes.
and kind of wanting to do some research and do what you could to help enhance their situation to become better.
And the migraine, I see my share of headache patients in the clinic, and there's some 400 plus classifications of headaches, but I really break them down into structural or migrainous. The structural headaches are things I can help with in the office, and those patients generally do well, but migrainous are usually the brain's not happy with you for usually a lifestyle standpoint, pre-diabetic, poor endothelial health, the inside lining of the blood vessels. So that's a pretty natural conversation for me in a chiropractic office because I see headaches so often. And if patients are willing to make the right changes, those headaches can be a thing of the past.
Which would be amazing for some people. That would be a total game changer for their life.
Headaches suck. That's just the mantra. They just suck.
Yeah, I'm grateful I don't get those. Knock on wood, not too often. So you also have a special certification in something that's called the Graston technique. So tell me about what this is and what are the benefits of it?
So that's a big part of, again, I feel that from a chiropractic standpoint, I wish more of my colleagues did soft tissue work. I think we'd rule the world if we did. Um, the idea of just adjusting without addressing the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, the fascia around it, just I picked that up early in practice or early in school, and so that became a pretty strong focus. I always say we're 90% of what we do in the office is soft tissue, and one of those techniques is Graston. It's just designed. When I mentioned that I had two patients recently that had knee problems, um, it was not something that adjusting was going to help. Stretching probably, but I really had to get in there and work on the soft tissues. As a matter of fact, I happen to have one of the instruments here. Um, just brought it home for the weekend, but it's idea of years ago, there was a lot of different thought process in pain and injuries and how to treat them. And then there was the first international conference on fascia, maybe about 10, 12, 13 years ago at Harvard. And all of a sudden, you had all these guys in the room, the acupuncturists and the Rolfers and the fascial manipulation people and the Graston. And so they're like, well, we're working on this. And ever since that point, there's been a definite convergence of what everybody thinks is the problem with a lot of acute and chronic pain. We all may treat it in different modalities. You're looking at PRP or prolotherapy, stem cell to a certain degree. It's one of the reasons why I think steroids remain off. We know that even a single exposure to steroids will permanently change the soft tissues. So we understand now why that is more of a factor. And so that so Graston is just one of the soft tissue tools. I couldn't practice without it. It allows me to treat things like knees that I wouldn't be able to treat otherwise. shoulders to a certain degree, wrists. All of those are strong aspects of what I see on a daily basis. And I think that if all I did was adjust, like I'd feel helpless with a lot of the different conditions that I feel.
Well, it's great that you have those extra tools to do that. I'm sure that that's obviously a good thing to have as a backup, not a backup, but as something that's going to perform better. And then sometimes, like you said, an adjustment's not what's needed. So,
And and then I find that when you do all the soft tissue work, like for headaches, I said I see a lot of headaches, and if they're structural, if they're coming from the whether it's the TMJ muscles, the forehead, or the muscles back through here, a lot of times people will see a chiropractor that just adjusts and doesn't address anything else over here.
right.
Um, and so I just wish more of my colleagues would do that. I think that many of them are caught in this idea that we have to see lots of patients, and we do not. We have a low volume, spend time with patients type of practice, and you can make that functional. And I think if more of my colleagues understood that, we'd have a much different um, exposure and thought process to.
Well, I would agree with that. I think the quality of care has just declined so much because, especially for these groups that are corporate, that are required
Yeah,
to see so many patients per
yeah,
day. So it's turned to quantity, not quality of care. So,
yeah. Wouldn't disagree.
yeah.
And that's all for financial. So it's just, I have a practice. I'm pretty much as busy as I want to be. Unfortunately, people get better, so we have this nice trickle of people getting better and people coming in. But that's that. Graston is a big part of how I treat soft tissues, but it's still part of the umbrella that I feel that soft tissue treatment is massively important when it becomes to both acute and chronic problems. I feel that most chronic problems come from mismanaging the acute.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a huge fan of things like massage guns. If you've had a problem for 20 years, the massage gun is probably not going to help. However, I was at Jiu Jitsu Open Map on Saturday, and I came back with my elbow, almost like a tennis elbow. Doesn't bother me, hadn't bothered me before. That's something that a massage gun, treating it right away, can be helpful and make sure that it doesn't become a chronic problem.
It's okay. So,
That's the managing the acute side of things.
right, exactly. Catching it before it develops into something that's not as savable. So, one of the other alternative things that you offer at your practice is a mild hyperbaric oxygen treatment.
Yes.
That's a big mouthful. So, tell me about this treatment in your clinic and who is this for and what are the benefits of it?
So we've got the hyperbaric chamber, and don't I make sure I bring up the whole body EMS too, because you'll find that very interesting. But the hyperbaric we got about 3 years ago. There was a study, and this is they call it mild, but it's a soft-sided chamber. Gets up to 1.3 atmospheres using supplemental oxygen. But I really started looking into it. It's always been an interesting thing, but there was a study on telomere use. I want to say it was out of Florida. The average age was like in the 50s, late 50s, I think. And telomeres are those wicks on the end of our cells. Basically, everything you've always seen is the healthier your lifestyle, the longer your telomeres will be. If you're eating fast food and not exercising, they will be shorter. But never seen anything that can actually lengthen them, like true anti-aging, until this study on hyperbaric, and they had a 30% increase in their telomere length. Now, granted, they were doing it 5 days a week for, I believe it was a 3 month study, but that was what really got me to look at making the purchase for the office. And it's been a really neat adjuvant for everything else that we offer. Again, the two things we probably see the biggest impacts are on the brain and the lungs. So post COVID for lung injuries, brain for that cognitive issues, for post concussion, epileptic patients. We had an epileptic patient that was using the chamber. We won't be seeing him and his family anymore because they bought their own for home use. Which is, there's times that it makes a lot of sense for that to make that kind of a purchase. But it's been interesting. To give you a perfect example, grew up in Chicago and had a family that I worked for, and they'd still come out to Arizona. I'd still see them occasionally, and Janet, the wife, had been developing cognitive issues, and we went to lunch, and she wasn't very communicative. Like hi, but there was no conversation. It was between me and her husband, and they came back to use the chamber. She got in the chamber and was in there for an hour. It came back. It called later that evening, and I'm like, hey, what was her thoughts on the chamber? And he's like, here, let me have you talk to her, and handed the phone. And she went into about a 3-minute conversation about how she really didn't think it was effective, and they don't really think they're going to come. They were going to be in for a couple days. She's like, well, I don't really think we're going to come back any. And she hands back the phone. He's like, you can see how much of a difference it made, because she was completely non-communicative at lunch, and then the fact that she could communicate why she didn't think the chamber was helpful was the exact logic for why they needed the chamber.
Right.
Um, so for cognitive decline, I think it's a powerful tool. Unfortunately, most people have a patient who's just a little. So I'm 55. I want to say he's like 56, and the cognitive decline is so advanced that I have to guide him to lie on the table because he doesn't understand
Oh my gosh.
what I'm asking him. He would do amazing in that chamber, but they would never understand why they're going in there and why they're going to be in there for an hour or so. So that's the downside. It's always about catching that kind of stuff beforehand. But post-concussive, I have a patient right now that was in a car accident. So we're getting him in the chamber to help. He's got cognitive issues from that. His son, now he's been in the martial arts a long time, Taekwondo as well. His son had been a pretty dynamic martial artist, and then got hit by a medicine ball 3 years ago, and he said he is not the same kid since then.
Mhm.
Like, well, let's get him in. Let's get him in the chamber and see if that can't make a difference. And I'm pretty excited and pretty confident that it will have an impact on his son. Because if you don't do anything now, his son's a teenager, like that, that it's just going to progress
Right.
from there. And as a parent, that's got to be terrifying.
Yeah, because they've done all these movies and things and documentaries on brain injury from sports
Yeah.
and things like that. That it does definitely catch you eventually.
The and I can't watch an action movie anymore without thinking how much head trauma is happening. And if it's a sci-fi future, man, I'm like, well, maybe they have some injections. I can't watch these and not understand. Like, it's funny how Hollywood has kind of skewed our perceptions. On the flip side, we have look at Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Jason Statham, how they've changed the idea of what we have to, how functional we can be as we age. But they've disconnected us from what head trauma does too.
Yeah, minus the behind the scenes part. Hey, so that was a perfect segue into the next topic I wanted to talk about. So, talking about Stallone and Schwarzenegger and, Stratham, we think muscles, we think bodybuilding, we think great shape. So, we had talked briefly before we pushed the begin record button on the podcast today about, aging and longevity and doing it naturally. And you had pointed out the fact when we were talking about some non-negotiables that you had one specific non-negotiable, and I would love for you to share that with us and elaborate on why that is a non-negotiable for you.
For me, so we talked about testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, which is a big in the martial arts world, aging world. It's a big topic. There's a couple of BJJ over 40 and over 55 groups, and like that's always coming up. And I really feel that testosterone is the marker, not the problem. And going back to Jack LaLanne never used anything like that, and there was no. Look at his lifetime achievements. There was no lack of virility in that man. So looking at testosterone as the marker, so we know that things like prediabetes will affect the Leydig cells produce testosterone, and so prediabetes will stop the ability or slow the ability of those Leydig cells to produce testosterone. So the problem is not the testosterone. I just envision this, overweight guy on the couch watching the commercial while he's eating potato chips and drinking beer about how you have low energy. It's got to be low T. that's not the challenge. So lifestyle plays a huge role. Stress will affect that. Stress, our adrenal glands can produce DHEA, which is an androgen. Our body uses that to make testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. So stress will affect that pathway. A lot of our environmental chemicals are estrogen based. So this is, people ask me, it's not beer. This is unsweetened organic iced tea. But a lot of but it's a glass jar. So a lot of our plastics, our BPA, our phthalates, and our fragrances, and our plastic linings, all of those they have an estrogen-like effect on the human body, which means it's going to affect how testosterone, both testosterone production, but also to how testosterone works in the human body if it's having to oppose estrogen. Those are all things that we have to look at. We look at physical fitness, like weightlifting and growth hormone, play a big role in that as well. Like weightlifting will increase testosterone production. Feel that somebody in their 30s who has their doctor tells them they have low T, we should be asking why. It's the drive to reproduce is the strongest drive in any organism, regardless of whether you're a bacterium or a human. And if that's not functioning properly, we have to ask why. It's because the body doesn't feel that it has the resources to grow. For men, it's not as big of an issue. For women and infertility, it is. They don't have to grow the baby, but they now have to help that new thing, whether it's a bacteria or calf or human, grow into a functional member of society. So I really think that, like for me, I don't find any issues at all with. Probably over the years, I wouldn't mind a nap during the day. I don't ever get it, but
I love
yeah,
naps.
the yeah. So I really, in almost all those scenarios, if you really look at the problem instead of looking at testosterone as the marker, and all too often we look at it as the marker, and it's because we have TRT to replace it. Otherwise, if we didn't have testosterone to replace it, you better damn well believe that in their 30s and 40s, people are going to be start looking for answers as to, well, okay, so my testosterone levels are low. Well, why? And we start getting answers and start looking at the foods that we're eating and exercising.
So,
I think as we
so based on what you just said, it's not necessarily that you're against it because I think that sometimes it is necessary for certain people, but you're really just suggesting let's peel down the layers, let's get to the root of what's causing that if we can and fix that instead of just slapping the band-aid on it with some testosterone replacement therapy.
I have several friends who are have been on TRT for years now, and both of them are right around my age, and they are just like I think that it affects the way your soft tissues heal. Uh, if you then that's long term use, it almost produces a disconnect between what we think we can do and what we should be doing, and those people also have the problems that were leading to fatigue or low energy have been left to burn for decades, and I think that's why they become more of a physiological mess as they get older. It's not necessarily the testosterone. It has more to do with the fact that those things weren't addressed 20 or 30 years ago.
Right. Whatever the underlying cause was, that's obviously still evolving, even if you're
Yes,
on
yeah.
testosterone replacement therapy.
So the other thing, I don't know how familiar you are with BFR, so blood flow restriction training,
A little bit.
and it surprises me how little it's not used, especially in the aging population.
Well, let's talk about it.
So BFR, I came across it first. There was a study on it. I'm like, well, what's this? So I started going down that rabbit hole, and all of a sudden there was this rather large body of research on BFR, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. But for the listeners, you put it's not a tourniquet, but it's a band that I call it. It congests the blood flow in the limbs, and it goes from a $400 Bluetooth blood pressure cuff that you can monitor the pressure to a simple $20 band you can buy on Amazon. And the idea, there seems to be a pretty consistent pattern of what to do with the BFR. So you'll put the bands on. It's not a comfortable experience. So we'll do them like we'll do our normal arm workout, and then I'll throw them on for arm curls. And let's say I do 95 arm curls, I may do 35 or 45 with the BFR, and I'll do a set of 30, very short break, 15, short break, 15, 15, just to really tax that limb. The advantage, I think a lot of this BFR probably came over people who were post surgery. So you could use less weights and get the same or better growth hormone response, which is going to lead to more testosterone. And then with aging, uh, my friend that was just in has not. I was a little shocked to hear he hasn't been working out for about 2 or 3 years. And with something like BFR, you could start with you don't have to have a full set of equipment at home because the weights you use are not nearly as strong.
Right.
So let's start with that at home with a simple, like those dial in, like a Bowflex type unit. That's going to be enough for almost everybody doing BFR. So it's just one more tool. But for some people, especially as we start getting older, if you don't have the time to go to the gym, maybe you could do BFR with a lighter set of weights or kettlebells and start getting more effort without the risk of injury. It's not fun. When those cuffs are on, I just want them off.
Yeah.
But from a safety standpoint, you're using much lighter weights.
So are there any contraindications to that? Like, is there anybody
There
that should
isn't
not
really,
do that?
like with, if you're on blood thinners or um, anything like that, you can have some potential complications. I think the data, the most recent review on BFR for, I think it was in people over 60 was the number. They found that it was at least as effective as um, heavy resistance training, which that would look a lot more favorable for people. So I don't think, just like everything else, the weightlifting itself shouldn't be a contraindication. You just need to go for lighter weights, maybe higher reps, whatever it is, if you have a limb that's injured. But it shouldn't create a problem with people unless somebody's on blood thinners. You might want to have a conversation
Okay.
with their doctor about that,
Okay.
or some doctor who is knowledgeable in BFR.
Okay. That's
So
interesting.
it's just another tool that we've added as we get older, as I get older, to best case scenario to helping us add or maintain muscle mass. Worst case scenario, I'm out $20 for the bands I bought on Amazon.
Repeat that last part. I didn't understand what you said.
Worst case scenario, I'm out $20 for the
Oh,
bands
there
I
you go.
bought.
Okay. Gotcha. So low risk. So obviously you talk the talk, but you also walk the walk because you're into fitness and you keep a consistent workout routine. So what kind of workouts do you enjoy most for keeping fit?
So I've always been in the martial arts. Fought in the ring in kickboxing. Been doing ground fighting for 35 years, almost my entire martial art. But the past 10 years, it's probably been focused on jujitsu, kickboxing, and judo. As a daily, when I'm busy at the office, I'm not there as often, but typically even one day a week at the least. And a good week, meaning a bad week at the office because I'm not busy, it may be 3 or 4 days for the week. I've always been a calisthenics person: pull-ups, chin-ups, dips, ab wheel, best $10 I ever spent. The handstand push-ups, all that stuff. Those stands you can buy that go in the doorway and you
Oh
can do
yeah.
pull-ups, chin-ups, great way, or the stands. My wife, who's 2 months older than me, the past couple of years she's been complaining about being heavier than she wants to be. She's always done like Beach Bodies on Demand, the um, the P90X type workouts. Those don't they're great conditioning, but they don't build muscle mass as much as weights.
Right.
So starting in October, we actually signed up at a gym and we've been going. And the twisted logic is that sorry, that's my old girl. The twisted logic is that even if I don't want to go, I know if I go, she'll come with me and she needs to go. So I've had that conversation with a couple families where I'm like, listen, even if you don't want to go, if you go, she'll go. And then you need to go for her. And it's this twisted logic that works for people that go in family members or spouses or parents and kids. So that's really where I'm at now. But also, just as part of our typical life, I I'll never pass up a set of stairs. There are times I'll just run to the car if we're out parking somewhere. Huge fan of short bursts. We do have an elliptical here that I will do. Usually, it used to be 2 to 3 times a week. Now it's usually about once a week. One day that we don't go to the gym. Uh, the so I'll do 30 seconds, like really intense. I couldn't do 40 seconds at the same pace. And my rest time really just depends on what I'm watching on Netflix.
Okay.
And then I'll do 10 sets of
So
that.
you're doing
So
high
if you,
intensity interval training.
yes, yes. And a big fan of that. If you look at the data on that, it really, the human body deals well with challenges. And running out of oxygen is a challenge for the human body. It looks up and it's like, holy crap, we need to fix this. The heart will actually form brand new collaterals if there's a heart artery that's blocked, and it you climb a set of stairs and certain cells don't get the oxygen they need, they will panic and release uh, hormones that drive collaterals. It forms brand new plumbing to feed those heart. So if we're doing that on a deliberate basis every day, looking at what it does for cardiovascular fitness, but that's got to be happening in the liver and the brain and the kidneys and every other organ. And the last thing I would say, so we do go to the gym twice a week. That's our commitment. Ideally, we should be working each muscle group at least twice a week. I think 7 days between muscle groups is not enough. It's too much time. But that's the commitment that we've made, to be able to go to the gym twice and do what we can to maintain healthy aging.
Now, when you're there, if you're going twice a week, are you doing full body? Are you doing upper body one day, lower
No.
body? Are
So
you
we'll
doing?
do arms, shoulders one day, and then back, chest, and legs the other day.
Okay.
So yeah, I understand that in an ideal world, like we should be hitting those muscle groups twice a week,
Yeah.
and we do not. Um,
Well, it depends on what your
maybe,
goals are, obviously, but I think it's great. I mean, because, some people, they think that if they're not doing anything, that to start, they have to go from 0 to 100. And that's the
yeah.
part that prevents people from moving at all, because they get scared that, oh God, now my whole life's going to be different because I got to go to the gym 5 days a week and I've got to do this and I got to do that. And so I like that you just started, in the last 6 months or so. You've developed the pattern, the habit now. It's been long enough where this is what's going to happen over the course of the week. We're going to get there twice a week at least. And then, if you decide that you want to bump it up, then yeah. But I think it's great that people are just don't become overwhelmed of the process of
Yeah.
thinking you have to go from 0 to 100. As long as you're moving and taking advantages when you're not at the gym, like you just said, you run to your car, you take the stairs, stuff like that can help.
We will typically, so like my wife and I went to Disney World. That's the other thing about quality of life. We were there in February, and we probably did 10 to 12 miles a day.
Oh yeah.
And if you have that ability to be functional, your life just starts to become limited. We'll go to Vegas a couple times a year, and same thing. We'll usually walk 10 to 12 miles a day,
Yeah.
and I'll never pass up a set of stairs. And there's a lot of stairs in Vegas.
There is.
So taking advantage of those things, like why not take the stairs when everybody's on the escalator? Usually there's no, I can go up as fast as I want because nobody else is on the stairs.
Correct. Yeah.
So just making that a part of my lifestyle. I don't ever want to slow down or not be able to physically do what I want to do.
Yeah, and I feel so grateful. I mean, it may sound crazy, but honestly, when I'm at the gym sometimes, like I'll be up, maybe warming up on the treadmill, or I'll do my cardio, and I can look over because the gym I work out at is 2 stories. So, like, all the cardio equipment's upstairs, and then it overlooks the downstairs, which is where people are lifting weights. And I'll get like teary eyed sometimes because I have so much gratitude that I'm healthy enough, obviously that I live in such an area that I have such a great gym at my disposal that I can afford to go, but more so than anything else, that I'm capable, that, I have 2 legs, I have my hands that I can lift weights with, I'm healthy and I can do it. And I just have so much gratitude. So instead of saying I have to go to the gym, I say, oh my God, I get to go. Because just like you, like when I get older, I want to be able to still do all the things that I can do now.
I picture myself retiring on the beach in Mexico and surfing.
I Yeah, something like that. Maybe that's where those fruity drinks with the umbrella and the Cabana Boys show up.
Because that's the other thing too. Is like I look at retirement, and it has to be something like you have to replace that work with something physical. I mentioned my older patients, both of them. She does yoga and like calisthenics, like boot camp type classes, like 5 days a week now. Now that she's retired, we need to find something in our older age that is physically demanding, I feel. And that becomes an important part of retirement is like we'll have more time to do those things. And we have to do those. Otherwise you're just gonna sit in the couch and next thing you know, 10 years have passed you by and you're not moving.
Right. You're all caught up on all the newest Netflix stuff, but that's
Yes.
about all you got going for you. So as we're wrapping up, Dr. Bogash, what drives you? What inspires you? Obviously, you shared you read a lot, you work out, you are very interested in helping people, I'm sure, which fills you up. But what truly inspires you every day?
I think being able to really, I'd be lying if I said that every patient I gave advice to took that advice. Um, it's not, but when patients come back and they're like, oh my God, I've been doing this, and not, there's no more gratifying feeling than being a pivotal part of somebody's lifestyle, like life changing. And I feel that when you start taking better care of yourself, everything else gets better. Your relationships get better, your finances get better, your happiness gets better. And so I've seen patients turn that around, and they were just in the right place at the right time. I have a lot of patients come through my office and it's not the right time for them. Uh, Gay is a patient who, one of my larger patients, probably 300, close to 400 pounds, and she had been a patient of mine for probably a decade.
Yeah.
It came to at one point, I taught a 10-week lifestyle modification class, and then it just clicked with her at one point, and she's like, I kept hearing you in the back of my head saying this. The only thing I couldn't get her to do was eat wild caught fish, but everything else, and she was down about 120 pounds. Unfortunately, now I hardly ever see her because she doesn't need me anymore because she's feeling better.
Wow.
But being being a part of people's lives when they make those changes is just like there's no more rewarding feeling in life than being a part.
Awesome. I'm sure. So, what's the biggest takeaway that you hope the listeners have learned from the information that you've shared with us today?
That getting like we have to have aging. We have to. It has to be a deliberate action towards exercise and eating right to age gracefully. I always say that we will not spontaneously get better tomorrow. We have to work on at least maintaining. I don't know, we reach a certain age and maybe we can't build anymore, but most people
Not true.
probably
I mean, they show
can.
that you can even do
Yeah.
that in your 80s.
Well, and I, so if you start, but I think like Jack LaLanne, you look at him at 96, he was not the same Jack LaLanne at 70, but there was no doubt that he maintained quality of life over all that time. But if he had started at 80, like clearly there's a lot of gains to
Sure.
be had. So that's the biggest thing is like if you want to age gracefully, you have it's not a passive process.
To be proactive, roll up the sleeves and do the work. So, what's next for you, Dr. Bogash? What's on the horizon for the rest of 2024 and 2025? What you got going on?
I think we're still, I put out a lot of content, so continuing with that content. When I find stuff in the medical literature that I read that I just have to share, I'll usually flag it for a video. Continuing with my martial arts journey, jiu-jitsu is a brand new world. It's the one thing that constantly humbles you. As good as you think you are, in any in most every day you're going to find somebody who's going to treat you or remind you that you're not.
Right.
So that as we get older and business is good, no complaints there. I really love what I do for practice. I could deal with insurance companies less, but that's a whole
That's a whole nother
another.
topic. Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for you, and thank you so much for taking time away from your dogs who are very upset with me, I think.
The landscapers just happen to be taking a lot of time here today.
I know we were I was laughing because my landscapers are usually here on Monday. I'm like, wow, if they chime in, we're really in trouble. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Obviously, you have a lot going on and lots of good, valuable info. I'm very grateful for you for sharing it.
Well, thank you for your time today, Abby.
Thank you. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Your Fitness Chick podcast. As always, I'm here to inspire, uplift, educate, and motivate you to become your best self. Hey, it's Abby, your fitness chick. Thanks for checking out today's episode. With your continued support, I can keep creating inspiring episodes just like this one. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. To stay motivated all week long, be sure to follow me on all my social media platforms. The links for those can be found in the show notes. Check out my website by visiting www.yourfitnesschick.com. And I'd like to thank my production company, Coraggio Media, but most of all you, my listeners, for helping to inspire me each and every day. I'll see you on the next episode.